Okay, welcome to week 897, whatever week we're at. I don't know the official number. Ed is on vacation. This week, we're going to be listening from Ron Howard here from over at xTreme Sequences. He's going to be teaching us how he likes to sequence. And if you don't know Ron, well, you're about to find out who he is, but I'm pretty sure everybody knows him. If you can, keep the questions to the end of the presentation. And other than that, Ron, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate it. Let me share my screen here and we'll get this going. And I have a presentation, but before I start the presentation, I'll explain how I'm going to roll this out, and hopefully this works for everybody. And I'm going to go over some theory, some ideas about what I think makes a unique sequencer, whether you're starting out or you've been sequencing for a while. And these are just ideas that I have that seem to work for me. And I love sharing this kind of knowledge, and I love seeing new people sequence and seeing the diamonds or recognizing the diamonds in the rough out there. So if I can inspire you, that's great. I can tell you teaching somebody to sequence is really, really tough. I have tried a few times on that, and it's always it's a difficult thing to do. And we'll talk about a little bit why that may be. But let's get into this presentation here. Let me just start this. All right, so my name is Ron Howard. The name of this course, it really is Sequencing from the Heart. I've done this in several different venues, and each one is just a little bit different, and I change the content up depending on how I'm feeling in the audience that's before me. But it's somewhat similar. So if you sat through this before, some of you will recognize this from various shows or minis that I've been to. But I own the company xTreme Sequences, and I've been doing this pixel show since 2016. I started with Lightorama in 2015 and realized very quickly I felt very restrained. And when I saw a basic house layout and how simple it was to put lights on an outline of a house, I was just absolutely hooked. And I haven't looked back since, and I turned a hobby into a side business, into a full-time business, which is really strange for people to understand who have real jobs and do this as a hobby. It's still a community thing. It's still from the heart. But I found a way to monetize aspects of this hobby for what I do, and it's worked really well for a couple of years, and we'll see how much longer it goes. So, bye-bye, xTreme. Who is Ron Howard? I'm not that director. I'm not that actor. I'm not that wealthy, I assure you. I'm the owner and operator, as well as a janitor for xTreme Sequences. My wife, of course, does help out every season. I couldn't do it without her, so she's great. I'm a mad sequencer, occasional troublemaker that some of you may know about. That's just my personality, nothing personal. And then, of course, I have some resources. For those that may not know, I have a Facebook group called xTreme Sequences Syndicate. I have a bunch of tutorials over on a Vimeo channel that you can get to with this link or from my website, which is xtremesequences.com. And next, let's get out of this and get into what does it take? You're brand new to xLights or a pixel show in general, and you're trying to figure out, well, I've got all these props and models to make. I have all these lights. I'm trying to learn how to work a controller. I'm trying to make it turn on. I'm trying not to blow up my house. What does it take now that we're in July? I want to be able to put together sequences. Well, it's going to take a lot of passion. You've got to love to sequence. And there's this thing about left brain and right brain that really trips people up. The analytical people out there, the people that work as, engineers is a great way to say it. They're great at engineering and the mechanical reasoning. And then when it gets to the side of the brain that requires the artistic execution, there can be roadblocks. And that's a normal thing. Very few people have a high percentage of both left and right brain. And I think I'm teetering somewhere in the middle of that. So I'm very fortunate. You have to practice. This is not easy. I always look at xLights as the Swiss Army knife of sequencing. There are great sequence softwares out there that are expensive to use. And there are some less expensive softwares out there, but they all have their inherent challenges. But xLights, because it offers so many, that's the greatest thing about it. And the worst thing about it is it offers so many choices. So you have to start slow and build. And you have to have patience. This is a tough one. People get frustrated. They don't start learning to sequence till July or August. And right around October, it's hit them. The reality has set in that they feel there's no way they're going to be able to have a show. So there are alternatives. There are sequencers like myself and others out there that provide great solutions for you when you run into that problem. Have monitors. I can't say this loudly and proudly enough. If you're going to take up sequencing seriously, get some monitor real estate space. That's the only way you can be productive. And you've got to dedicate. You've got to put the time in. There's no way to cheat it. So what makes a unique sequencer? It's one thing to be a good sequencer or a great sequencer, but how do you become unique? And musicality is really helpful. If you talk to Tom Bett George, you talk to Ryan Casper Cook, chances are you'll find out that they have a huge musical background, and it does help in how they convey their shows musically. Timing awareness is another good thing. A lot of people out there with 2 left feet trying to sequence, and if we didn't have the timing marks and some of the automation built into xLights, they might be in real trouble. xLights gives us some of these tools for the people that might be somewhat challenged with timing. So just because you're not a musician doesn't mean you can't sequence. I think a great example of that is Matt Johnson, who does not have any musical background, but he found a way to sequence pretty doggone well. Software knowledge, man, we could write books about this. Trying to understand everything about xLights it's impossible. I don't think any of the developers know everything about xLights. It's just too expansive. So they know more about the nuts and bolts of it, the mechanics of it, but executing the software to express yourself, that's a challenge for all of us. And speaking of challenge, you have to challenge yourself. Don't become lazy and complacent. Constantly try to strive to do something unique. You've got to focus when you're doing it. Never be satisfied with your work. I hate all of my sequences in some way that they're just never finished. I just ran out of time. And stay true to who you are. If you love speed metal and that's what you want to play for Christmas and that's what makes you excited when you sequence, then do it. Do the show for yourself. So setting the stage, there have been many, many classes and conversations and tutorials about these items, which really is your dream layout. You have to love your layout. You'll sequence much better if you love the way it looks. I've got a lot going on in mine. I love how some of the whole house effects look, but I also like the variety. And because I do sell sequences, I like having the variety for people to pick from when they get those sequences. There's a lot of choices, and it's just what I do. Models, I can't believe the number of models that we have available to us today. If we went back to beginning 2016 and you were looking at Boscoyo's catalog, you were pretty excited about that. I mean, great Coral products and the ABS stuff. And now we have other companies like Gilbert Engineering out there who's setting the bar pretty high with the creativity behind some of these models. And it's great for the community because it offers choices. And as a sequencer, when I have things like the rosary wreath in front of me on my screen, or the mother of all wreaths, or the mega reel, all these things are just exciting to me as a sequencer because they open up so many avenues to create expressive movements. And hopefully we'll look at some of those in a bit. Groups, it's all about groups, folks. Groups. If you've got more than one thing, put it in a group. It makes sequencing easier. It makes mapping easier. And the effects can do really cool, dreamy things as opposed to being isolated. Submodels, gosh, man, the developers have done some amazing work to make putting together submodels so much easier than it ever was. It's just a joy to work with and explore. And then the groups, when you create submodels, you want to put those in groups. It's all about groups. And then the big thing I think is going to be confusing to some people is the order in which these things are. If I've got a rosary wreath and I have 8 submodels, what goes in order? Is it the circles? Is it the ribbons? Is it the arrows? Is it the feathers? All of that absolutely 100% has an impact on the overall look of the playback for that effect. So those things are very critical. I'm going to touch very lightly on music. I don't tell anybody what kind of music they should play, whether it's medleys. It's just the only thing I can suggest is sequence to what you like. There are things I sequence where I don't always love the music, but if I'm hired to do it, then I learn to love it and get it done. If you're sequencing for yourself, I certainly suggest having some good headphones, isolating yourself, and good speakers to blast it, because headphones can be very fatiguing for your ears if you're sitting down for a lot of hours in the daytime sequencing. And this one, wow. You know, the nearly 2-week vacation I went on was a blessing, because it kept me away from my computer for that time for the most part. And it helped out with my eye fatigue. If you're in front of monitors for a long time, you will develop eye fatigue. And you go to a doctor and they're going to say, yeah, 2 weeks from your computer. And it's true. I came back feeling very refreshed, rested, and I felt creative. So with xLights, we don't have time to go through every single effect and what they do. And I promise we'll get to the play section where we can just start putting stuff in, and I'll share some things I did with the sequence. But the effects basics, where everybody should start, the effect settings. And I'm a firm believer, when you're practicing and you're brand new, my go-to effect is a single strand effect. I wouldn't look at anything else until you put that on a house outline, or your tree, or an arch, twig tree, candy cane, whatever. Start with a single line effect and test all the settings. And we'll do that. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. And then, of course, colors. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. I am partially colorblind. I can identify most of these colors, but I do stick to primary colors. I try not to go to using chartreuse with eggplant too often. And then transitions. Oh, let's go back. Watch this transition. Is this amazing? Don't you just want to put that on your house? Yeah, not me. There are some cool transitions built into xLights. I don't like these. And the reason for this is when you watch a Hollywood film, very rarely, not since the 70s and early 80s, did we see transitions like that. Because they look a little cheesy, and to me, it's all about production value. So, I mean, if there's a good fit, cool, but I stay away from those type of transitions. The transitions I do like, however, and I want to point this out to you. Let me go to my annotate here and make sure you can see this, is the in and out transitions, and they're not on here. We'll see it on another panel. But the transitions from one effect to another, a few ways of doing that. They can overlap, which is fine, and using the start in and out times. And we'll look at that. Very important. This really shows the difference between somebody who has experience sequencing and somebody who does not. All right, let's get right back into this. And bulk edit. I'm going to show you some ways that I think will save you a lot of time when you're sequencing. And bulk edit was one of the greatest things that ever happened to xLights. When we get into the advanced section and we look at some of these things, and I know we'll run out of time, but let's kind of look at what I play with in my world that I think makes my sequences more unique. And that is applying multiple layers, adjusting the layer blendings, manipulating them, the layer settings, working with value curves, playing around in RotoZoom, generating 2D paths, certainly working with the shader. I have two thoughts on the shader. I think it's really cool, but I think you have to be careful and not let it make you a lazy sequencer. And I'll try to illustrate what I mean by that. And the warp effect, which is just, I don't know, man. To me, that is like crossing the T, putting the dot on the I. It's really a cool effect. And of course, I think I left off the kaleidoscope, but the kaleidoscope should be in there as well. That's another fantastic effect. And then what truly sets xLights apart, I think, from any other software I've ever looked at or messed with, is the unlimited combinations of using everything I just put on here and more that I haven't put on there. And that's what makes this very unique as a software. I don't know what the exponential number would be, but it has to be a factor of ridiculousness with the various combinations of all of this that you can put together to express your sequencing style. So let's play. Let's get rid of this. Let's go right into xLights. And by the way, Tom, if anybody asks a question in chat, because I don't have it open right now, you can certainly, well, I will open it, but nothing's in there, so cool. All right, so we went through sequencing theory from my perspective really, really fast. And now we get to play a little bit. This is a sequence I did called a Home Alone Carol. And I think, like most foundations for sequencing, it all begins with isolation of the voices. If you look at a symphony, you have your bassoons, you have your trumpets, your tubas, your percussion, your timpani, your snare, all these various voices with different timbres. And I like to identify colors with timbres. And they're not always the same. Sometimes I break the rules. A lot of times I use yellow for like a low sound, the bass notes for drums or bass guitar. And in a recent sequence, I flipped that. I used yellow for the snare hit and red for the bass. So every now and then it's good to break the rules and do something different. It catches people off guard. But I think the starting point is in the timing. So I have a bass drum here. And all of these were hand tapped. All of this was from listening to it. And some of it, if we're just listening to this section here, the bass. And that may be loud. So I'm going to put that on quiet so I don't blow your eardrums out. And that part's pretty easy. But when we get down to the intro low bells and different things like that, many times I'll be in here and I'll play this at half speed, and then we're dealing with this. And that's what it takes to get these timings just right. No onsets is not going to pick up these notes here. It's just not going to be thorough enough. So you can see my note onsets here. And where some of these might line up, some don't. So if I look at this note right here and I come straight down, that's somewhere in the middle where note onsets is looking at this. So it's not a percussion detector per se. So you have to be careful using note onsets. It does a good job, but it doesn't isolate nearly enough for what I want to do. The other thing I'll say about the intricacies of these timings is it makes a lot more sense to work in 40 frames per second. Working in 40 frames, I can get deeper in the isolation. So instead of being stuck with 16th notes, now I can be working with 32nd notes because it just gives me more frames to play with. So I prefer that. It can be risky for people with really large shows, but the worst, from what my understanding, that it will do is it will just push your frame rate to a lower frame rate. And supposedly that's okay. All right. That's really what I do first. And there are times where certain songs, certainly faith-based songs, that really mean a lot to me, I will double click in here and I will put the verbiage of certain components of that song, from the heart, God's hand, whatever it might be, as a reference for me to think about when I'm seeing this in this section. And I might want to put a reference to, God's hand, and maybe I'm going to do something that creates some type of symbolism. And I think symbolism is a really cool thing. Sometimes we get a little cheesy with it, but that's okay. I love being cheesy with symbolism for funny things like Don't Stop the Santa Man. That just makes you laugh. I think all sequences should make you feel something. They should make you feel proud, strong, scared, nervous, excited, nostalgic. If your sequence is not emoting something, then it's probably, if you can't feel it, then your audience probably doesn't feel it as well as they could. And keep in mind, our audience's bar is set really, really low. Everybody on this call is going to be the worst critic to your own shows and to any of ours. And it's just because we're in the hobby and we know how much work this takes. But most people watching, they don't know all the behind scenes of what's going on to make this show run. So keep that in mind. Don't be too hard on yourself. So when we have all the timings in and we're ready to begin, then it's a question of where do we start? If the song starts here, and maybe we'll go back to the normal side. So I hear these rhythms, and I'm hearing bells, and I'm hearing the bass drum that are really dominant. So what I love doing is capturing these bells. And I have my, where are they at here? Let me find them. Let me find them. I know they're in here. Here we go. Here we go. Pixel poles. So here's my pixel poles. So when you have rhythms that you want to isolate per each item in that group, typically there's not a lot of tools that'll do that for you really well and give you the control. So when I double click here, you'll see all of the pixel poles, 1 through 8. And because there are 6 notes in this that I'm repeating, 1, or 4 that is, I'm using the larger pixel poles. So the first pixel pole is going to be the larger one. So I just kept these on the same. So when I play this, watch the pixel poles. We're only going to see. And so that's pretty simple, right? But a lot of people will just throw an effect on here and call it a day going, hey, man, I'm hitting it on the note. Fantastic. Well, the way you can immediately improve the production value of a single effect on a single model is to give it some movement. And let me zoom in here a little bit more so you can see what we're doing. And if you have something with density, don't be afraid to use an image. So this image here is the bell. So you can barely make it out. That bell is what's ringing. So there's movement in the frame adjustment of the bell. And then what I have happening is I have just a shockwave effect, but it's going up. So if I turn that off, then we just have this. But I don't like this because the shockwave now is hitting the bell and it kind of takes away from it. So just a basic addition of a movement using a value curve, which you can just use, well, this is the built-in one. There we go. And you click OK. All of a sudden, now you have movement going up. And when we play this section back, hold down my control key, Ron. Hold down my control key. And let's resize this. There we go. And we'll play that little section. Okay, cool. So that comes in really nice. It makes a great impact, and it really isn't that tough to do. So each of the poles get their own effect with the picture image. So time consuming, yeah, it is, because again, we're looking at different notes that we're sequencing this to. Here are the intro high bells, and then we have intro low bells. I think these are the low bells. And then we get over and we incorporate also the twig trees, which is just a whole lot of fun. Twig trees are further up. There we go. Same thing. So if I double click here, you see what these guys are doing. And these guys are just moving down, 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 down. And the idea here is try to have a different color. You want a contrasting color, otherwise it's just going to confuse the eyes and you're not sure where to look. And so that's one way I approach sequencing, is to look at it from a percussive point of view and start to think about voices and where they go. If we look at the Living Light Show flakes, gosh, these things are just so fun to play with. I have my drum sections. Let's see if I can get to those. Here's my left drumstick, right drumstick. And again, I could have just put an on effect there and that would have been it. But instead, I put a, hello, where are you? I put a fan on top of this effect. So I get a nice little movement of the stick. And it's just to create a fill. And the reason it's doing that is all those hi-hat movements. I mean, let's look at the hi-hat. I mean, hi-hats. Hey, hi-hats. Yeah. So there's just a whole lot going on there, but it creates a really unique little feel for it. And the rest of this, let's talk about the mega tree for a second. I always put my mega tree way up top because I usually end up spending a lot of time on it. For the whole house, as you can see here, I used a shader effect for all pixels that'll come in, and maybe it won't now that it's shy, and we'll go to the mega tree. Let me scoot over here. Again, symbolism or using something to express what the sequence is doing. I decided to use a bell or different things. There it goes. I'm using effects on here with a photo. So the photo is just a GIF image going back and forth. And then in the hits, and that's really it. So this is 2 is unmask, right? So we're getting some color through that. And then we're getting into the warp effect, which is making the image do that. And then below that, we're using, well, actually that gets into the matrix. The matrix is kind of funky in that we're using the shader. And I alluded to this earlier about don't use the shader for the shader effect. Try to be creative with the shader. And I have 3 shaders, one on top of each other here. And this is how this is supposed to look. I know there was a version that came out and it suddenly didn't look that way anymore, but this is the way it's supposed to look. And then when we get into the and of course, because we're on Zoom, it's going to sit here and tell me it doesn't want to show me. There we go. It's going to want to think, let it catch up, let it catch up, let it catch up. There we go. What I love about this, let me put it right, is the whole texture of the bell here is nothing more than shader effects. It's taking 2 shader effects and it's creating this really cool, I don't know what you call this, a skin. And because of the layer blendings, 2 reveals 1 is mask, normal. And gosh, don't ever ask me to explain exactly what these are doing in the technical terms. I don't know if I could ever clearly ever communicate that properly without just confusing somebody. A lot of this is practicing and seeing what looks right and then executing it. Let's see, anything else interesting in this? That's another shader. Now that's just a blatant use of shader that I should be ashamed of, but I liked it. I want to show you a warp section in here that I really like. And let me get to it here so we're not listening to the whole thing. Let's come right up after this section. Okay, so a lot of stuff going on there, and hopefully you could still hear that. I just don't want to blast your ears out while I'm trying to talk while it's going. Lots of interesting things going on here. The warp effect is another great go-to to add movement. Somebody was asking in Facebook in a post today about, how can I make a singing face kind of move around if it's on a matrix. And this is a great way you can do this. You can use a warp effect and put it on wavy, and that's what's causing this thing to kind of wobble around. It's just a really cool effect. There's more to it than that. I don't know if I have it on here. I think I That's interesting, black marks. It's also kind of bouncing around, and it's with zoom, but I'm not seeing the settings in here, so I'll have to check that out. That's interesting. But you can get a lot of neat movement from these effects as well using the X pivot, Y rotation, X rotation. I'll work with these four, and a lot of times I'll find something like this, and of course it's going to want to think. Shader takes some resources. Oh, there it is. Now it's showing it. Be patient, Ron. If we look at these X pivot points here and the Y rotation and Y, setting these is what's getting this thing to kind of move forward and back. It's really cool three-dimensional augmentation of the model, or not the model, but the effect. And if you just experiment, and you don't have to go in here and play a lot, just use the up, down, and play with these, and then go to your application order. This will blow you away. Change it from XYZ to XZY, and it's going to have a different feel. Change it to the next one down, and you'll see that these things have different looks depending on what the effect is. So your homework really is use these on some cool effects on the Megatree or on the Matrix, and then when you find something really cool and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to have that, select all of your effects, because you may never ever remember it. Hit save before you do anything. Right click, effects presets, give it a name, and save it. Okay? That's absolutely what you want to do. Okay? So you go here, effects presets, you click new preset, give it a cool name, click OK. Or you can go to here, add group, just put on here, cool matrix effects, click OK. Now you've created a new group. It'll be down here at the bottom. In there, create new preset, and just call this wobbly fun. And now you have it. And then you're done. So if you were to ever forget that, and let me just go up here to my beats. Let's go to hi-hats. Let's find something that's right there that starts on that. There we go. That'll work. So if I had lost this, I could delete that. Then I could just come in here, right click, effect presets, go to my wobbly, apply preset. Now it's back. No harm, no foul. And you can leave this window floating around if you like, or just close it. So I suggest when you come up with really cool ideas to create presets, because you can use those again. You can change the colors and make them unique for other sequences. I don't do a ton of that, but every now and then I do, but I typically will change things. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. I want to move into just playing a little bit. So I'm going to create a new sequence, discard changes. And while this is waiting, maybe we should have some on-hold music play while we are waiting. What is the pixel density on your pixel poles? I'll show you in just a second. As far as priority of effects, the lower effects trump the lower effect. The higher effects trump the lower effects. Swap that and you'll be correct. Oh, you did. Excellent. And what I have found, if this is spinning like this, just give it time. It should fix itself. If it doesn't, I'll kill it. That'll give me a chance to answer these. The pixel poles, I believe, are 288 and 144 for the shorter ones. But yes, oh, look at there. See? Didn't I say in my presentation patience was something that was fairly important? Animation. Yeah, we'll put it there. And let's put this on house and done. Here we go. Here's all my pixels. Here's this. Let's find something kind of, well, let's do this. Let's go have some fun. Let's go to our rosary wreath. I'm going to show you something kind of cool. Well, we'll grow to the rosary wreath. Let's just go with a house outline. I'm going to go with a real basic idea here. So we'll go to our eaves, and I'll put another layer above, and we're going to drop an effect on here. And before I forget these other questions on here, Whoa, Betsy. Whoa, Betsy. Let me address some of these questions real quick. So yes, the pixel pole, that is 288, and the lower one is 168. I was incorrect. 168 and 288. And these are all running on separate outputs to a controller that's sitting in the center. So 288 pixels out of one output, 12 volt, as far as 16, 17 feet away, not a problem. It's magic. Next question, the layer is running from the bottom up, so the effect on the bottom, keep in mind there, yes, okay, so John D's answering that, thank you. Bottom up, got it, go. The xLights manual has great graphics to explain. Yes, but you don't have to go to the manual. So if you're not sure what these layer blendings do, Scott created a lovely little button here that creates its own window that you can resize, print, set next to you, or if you just like opening up another window, no big deal. But this will stay here the whole time. And this is pretty cool. We're not going to read through these. We're not even going to study this. You can do that on your own time. I like to sequence like I would cook. I just go from scratch and try new things all the time. I have gotten used to certain things that I rely on, and I'll go over that with a mega tree. But here, so a basic red color that we've all seen going across, we'll change the chase size a little bit. We'll put on some 3D fade, and let's just do this from the middle. And we will change our buffer to, let's put that on per preview. There we go. And let's make the chase size a little bit more, maybe less cycles. Number of chases way too high. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So this is easy. You could see this on just about anything. Your outlines, in many ways, I think the outlines is like a background or a backup singer to the main singer. It's that ambiance in the background to frame everything else. So we don't always make it too crazy, but we want the festive colors. But sometimes, you know, even this it looks cool, but if you just want to add a little bit of movement to it, just what I do here is I'll copy this and I'll paste this here, and I'll change the color to a contrasting color. Let's just go with white. I will take the chase size down to nothing. I will take 3D off, and I'll probably just have it go one way. And then you decide how much salt and pepper you want. Do you want the chase size, the number of chases to be more? That gets really, really busy. But I will tell you, people always kind of freak out at my show when they see the simplest things. This right here alone seems to get people really excited. And it drives me crazy because I'm like, well, whoa, wait. Let me show you this effect that's got, 8 layers, and I'm using submodels and all this layers and blending. And they're like, don't know what you're talking about, man. And then you get frustrated and realize that all I had to do was sequence this for the whole song and people would be happy. But again, it's just creating a little bit of motion in the sequence itself, which creates just a little bit of dimension, which is nice. You can also take it up a notch, and maybe we just put a fan on here, which sounds crazy, but I use fans on a prop like this all the time. And because I've got stuff going on here, I'll usually pull this to the side. I'll isolate it. First thing I'm going to do is figure out what color do I want. Let's use another contrasty color. Now, I don't want this over the whole house, so I'm going to change my layer settings to overlay center so that I can get it going both ways, right? You can also check out per model per preview, which looks about the same. Single line looks about the same. No big deal. So overlay scale, in this case, just about the same, so I'll typically put it on centered. And at this point, I might think, well, do I only want 2 arms? Now it's looking different. And we put this over here. And now we've introduced yet a new movement to the sequence. Depending on what the music's doing, this could be really, really cool. If you're not happy with that, we could start playing with layer blendings. And here's the approach I would teach you when first learning how to play with layer blendings. Click on the top effect. Go to your layer blendings. Put it on effect 1. That's all you see. Put it on effect 2. all you see is what's beneath it. And after a while, you'll stop doing that. Just put it on 1 is mask. Watch what it does. 2 is mask. 1 is unmask. It's like, oh, suddenly that's interesting. Now we're having all the red and white bleed through, and this certainly to me looks more Christmassy. This could be great for a hip hop song, or it could be just I'm not so sure about a classic Christmas song, but that's kind of cool. So right away, I put that in my mind that, I kind of like that. So that's 1 is unmasked. 2 is unmasked. Well, now we just lost the colors. It's mostly just white, okay? 1 is true unmasked. And it's a little underwhelming because we're missing a lot, but watch what happens when we go to 2 is true unmasked. We have just really the yellow, and I'm not digging it. 1 reveals 2, and I'll show you in a minute why this is pretty cool, especially 2 reveals 1. Not going to see much here. Shadow 1 on 2, and this is really determined by the colors used. And then we're back to that, which looks like it's by itself. Layered does a little bit of everything, and I find that useful. Average, you can read. Let's just read. What's the difference with layered and average? Layered, effect 1 only shows in black regions of effect 2. Average, take value of effect and add it to the value from effect 2, average the sum. I'm not doing algebra here. Average, bottom top, that splits the difference between the physical buffer. Okay, left, right does the same. Additive adds. Subtractive is probably one of the coolest, unique layer blendings I don't see enough people playing around with. And then there's max and minimum. But the one we said we really liked was 1 is unmasked, right? So that's cool. Now, you find something, and I said before, don't become complacent. Push the boundaries a little bit further. What happens if we were to change it to 1 arm? All of a sudden we have syncopation, and we're creating negative space in between the syncopation. And that's pretty cool. I like that. I'd probably put this effect and create a preset, and then I'd probably do it with this as well. And if we put 3 on there, then it starts speeding it up. And here, it's really speeding it up. So how do we slow it down? We could take the speed of that, and now we're back to where we were. Or put it back on 10 and cut the arms down by 2. And so far, my favorite is this. When I have something I kind of like, and there's a chance that section may be on the house for that sequence, I might go in here and copy these and paste these here. All right. And now we have some unique movement. That's kind of cool. And we can break some rules. If we want to now change this to right to left, and this one, well, to middle. Now we've got them bouncing up different directions. But the whole point is this would look pretty cool in an isolated section where it's very rhythmic in nature. And I love the negative space that it creates in here. It allows it to breathe. Kind of like a heartbeat there, isn't it? So that's kind of cool. Let me show you some other cool tricks you can use when you're playing around with sequencing. Let's go straight to our mega tree, which was right back up there. Yes. Let's just insert 2. And let's just put a timing mark here. And that's good. Let's just put a good old-fashioned spiral on here. And so if you hold Control-Shift-Arrow, it'll go to the end, which is nice. Or if you have something that, and say way this way, Control-Shift-Right arrow, and it fills that up. Or if you're trying to get to the edge, just Control-Arrow will put it to the line. That was Control-Right arrow. So here, what I want to do is just create a nice, subtle effect, a thin spiral that's moving real sweet-like, and then copy this and paste it above it or below it. Doesn't really matter. I kind of get in the habit of putting it below it in case I want to put something above it, like a kaleidoscope or warp or something. So I always try to leave this open for an afterthought. But once I copy the same thing here, even if I change the color, look at that. Ooh, pretty. What I like to do is flip horizontal, or you could flip 180. That makes it pretty cool. But to get it to be symmetrical, you flip horizontal. And that looks pretty cool. And then if you decide that you wanted to put one extra palette rep on there, you could take both of these, hold down your control key, select them both, right click on the palette rep, bulk edit, and then just change this to 2. Okay. And now we have 2. And we've got some cool stuff going on. And then why don't we take over our warp effect, and let's go over here and put this on ripple. That's kind of a cool effect. It's not bad. I'm not in love with it, but it's pretty cool. And let's add one more layer at the top, as I often do. What if we want snow falling? And by the way, let's do this as well. Let's take these. Let's make the thickness with bulk edit. Let's go make it twice as thick. Because when you put on 3D, it's going to cut it down a little bit. It makes it a little bit thinner. What if we want snow falling in this, but we don't want snow to show where any of the red lines are? This is really easy to do. Drop your snow effect on here. Change it to a white color. By the way, there's a lot of times I'll use a nice soft blue and white together for snow. Then I'll increase that. And that's just really nice, free-flowing snow. But as you can see, it's on top of the red. And if you want it just on the inside, the best way you can do this is take this and go 2 reveals 1. And now it's only on the inside of the effect. It's not on the outside, it's on the inside of it. This is great for a lot of effects where you're trying to get something unique to happen, but you don't want the outside impacted at all. Okay. And then why don't we shoot these guys back over here, and we'll look at this here. I'm going to make these a little bit bigger again. We're going to take our thickness to, we won't go obnoxious, but we'll go up here. That works. I like it. And take this tool. I'm totally breaking the rules. I'm showing you all these other things, and I wanted you to practice with this tool alone, but we'll get back to that. So the single line, go with a contrasting color. I think let's go with a dark blue. And as you can see here, we can create some number of chases. Let's create a whole bunch of those, and we can change this to single line. That looks pretty cool. Maybe chase size, we'll isolate this down to just that many, and we'll still put on 3D. And then again, just putting the single strand tool on top of an effect or 2, then we click on the normal and we go through this again. 1 is mask. Well, that's kind of cool. If I was to take this transformation and change it, oh, no. Not liking that. Let's go back here. Let's keep focused. 1 is mask, 2 is mask. And that's kind of cool right there, because I know for a fact I could create more lines of interest, and that's a unique effect. So I'll remember that. 1 is unmask. Again, that's fairly creative. 2 is unmask. And now it's getting into really cool looking diamonds. And maybe it makes sense at this point to slow this down a little bit. And we'll just bring this down. Oh, let's have it go up. Why not? No. Let's leave that right. Oh, I do like that. Let's leave that like that. And then we continue our journey. 1 is true. That's okay. 2 shows the color now. And then we get this. And then we get 2 reveals. And that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. And I think what I would do differently here is, knowing that this effect looks cool in here, I might maybe put a different effect in there, or change the size of this to get that color back there. Or maybe do a double bounce. So the idea is now we're creating these really nice contrasty colors in here, and it's just with 3 effects. But the key to this is the good old basic single strand effect, one of my favorites. So that's really just playing. And again, the way to reverse engineer this is pick it apart, pull these off to the side. What's this bottom one doing? That's just turning. What is this guy doing on it by itself? Well, that's just turning. They're just opposite turns of each other, right? You put them together, and now you have this. And then we add a layer above, which is the single strand. And by itself, this is all the single strand tool is doing. It's a single line, double bounce, 3D fade, and it creates a really lovely texture inside the tree. And if you want to add a little more texture in there, put sparkles. Now there's no music here, so we'll just add them manually, and just very, very subtle. Just put it on 3. And that to me just looks gorgeous. And that's not where the fun stops. We could put another single strand tool up top here and make this white. And we could put this on default. Let's see what we've got here. I don't know if I'm going to like that because we need this on normal. There we go. And let's put this on just going up. And I've got my blue. I don't want the blue on there. And we could change the size of this. And now we have another element, which is just these slow moving, soft whites lifting. And then you can decide how many chases you want. There's just 1 chase. You could speed that up, or you could put 2, 3, 4, depending on your tree. I think this looks best. And that just looks pretty. And again, you go back to the same rules. What are we going to do now? Okay, well, that looks cool. I love that. I'll make a preset, but I'm curious. What if I do this? Well, now we have a completely different effect, and that's kind of cool. I'm kind of digging that because now I probably want to speed the second one up a little bit. There we go. But I'm not finished playing. 1 is a mask. 2 is mask. Whew, hot mess. 1 is unmask. That's kind of cool. I'm digging the diamonds. That's no color there. 1 is true, similar to the other. 2 is true, which doesn't help us. And just over time, you start finding really cool, creative effects. And of course, we get back to the basic one, which I kind of just like here, or I can just put this on normal. I did tell you about the subtractive, and that subtractive creates a whole new element that I think more people should play with, and that creates some lovely negative space in there. It's just, and for the right song, that's just a cool effect. All right, I'm going to take a slight break just so I can read some of these comments and see if there's anything that's in there. Scott is the man. Hell yeah, he is. You may also want to explain. Some people get confused. Yeah, you're going to. This is all confusing stuff. I don't expect anybody to learn this stuff overnight. It just takes time and practice. And so there's a lot of smart people out there that didn't have a lot of sequencing background, but they would take these sequences and reverse engineer them. They simply look at this and go, well, okay, but what the heck did Ron do here? Okay, well, fine. Well, why does that work with this? Why is he using 1 is unmask? Well, okay, let me turn it to normal. What's normal do? Okay, well, I see there's a reason. 1 is unmask. Oh, well, that looks pretty cool. It's just from playing. I mean, I've been working with the software since early 2016, and it's just butt in the seat time. That's all I can tell you. That's the biggest thing here. We're at the hour. I don't want to, we can stop the recording, and then we can have some chit chat, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can for the group in a loosey-goosey format, if that's cool with you guys. Is that cool, Tom?
Ron, you can keep going recording. I'd probably like to get the rosary on there, like you did at Expo.
Yes, the rosary. I did say I was going to do something with that. Okay, so Interesting story with the rosary. Jay and Chris were hanging out at our house one time. They were bringing me some models to mess around with. I had some ideas. They had some ideas, and we had a fair share of libation. A libation, yeah, and just having a good time hanging out. And they spent the night. And the next morning, I don't remember if it was Chris. I don't remember if it was Jay, but they saw this medallion about a.
It was me.
It was just, of course, it was you, Jay. So Jay saw this medallion, which is it's kind of it looks like a wood cutout. And it's from, it would be something that would come from Peru, and for my wife. And one of them, I'm still not convinced who, said, you should do a model of that. I think it was Jay. It was just foggy that morning. That's all. And I thought, wow, that would be cool. And I mean, literally in 2 days, he had the artwork done, and then I painstakingly made the models for it, and it kind of grew, and ran into some challenges with the wiring, and had Doug Reel help me figure out some challenges, and I'll share some of those with you, because this is a very complicated model in many ways, but not green. Let's just go with blue for right now. Oh, let's go with red. So there's a lot going on with this. So I'm going to take you through the submodels on this, and this is really important. If you want your ROSA wreath to look correct, you want to have these submodels. And these are the rings. We have arrows. We have spokes. 32 spokes. We have the outer ball. Kind of wish I'd changed that name, but that's okay. We have ribbons. We have feathers. And that's kind of it, right? So there's a lot. And if you make your own roast wreath, but you wire it different than what you see here, right click, light, expand this guy out. If you wire it different than this, then you've got to make sure your submodels work. If you're off on this, it's 696 pixels. And I've talked to a few people who have messed up typically near the end, because it really does wire itself. Everything just goes in a circle, and there's only one jump, and it's in this little section right here. That's the only place it jumps. And there's no need for any jumpers. And when I say jump, it skips pixels to get to the outside and go all the way around. It's important to have those submodels correct, because when those are correct, then we have our groups. And you'll see here, I have a lot of groups. So for the ROSA wreath, I have arrows, and you can't see them on here, but these are all the groups. And you'll see down here, I did something different with the feathers. I was trying to apply an effect to the feathers, and man, it was freaking out, and I couldn't figure it out, because I know the two sides touched. And it was Doug Reel and we just worked through it, and we found an answer, and it was really kind of brilliant. And that was to create an odd group and a feathers even group. And there's my old group. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. I'll do something with the old group. And I know Scott was working on some of this, so I don't know if that was impacted, but we're about to find out for the first time. I'm going to click on just where's my old feathers group? Okay. And then I'm going to put this on vertical. And I'm going to move this house out of the way so we can just isolate this. Notice how this is missing here. Let me speed this up just a little bit. So look what happens with the rogue pixels, kind of just doing its own thing. It's like, And this is only with a couple of effects, primarily the single strand tool. So the way we figured out how to make this work better was to put this in a even group. So now we have this, which looks cool, or put it in the odd group. But when you put it in both, you get this. See, it won't show in the preview because it's only showing the one. But let me zoom in on this. you get this cool effect, which is neat. And I'll try to just get this to stay right there. If we take this and reverse it, we can go right to left. Then we can just have all sorts of fun. You can see now suddenly it's completely different. Or if we take one and maybe do a double bounce, we get some really cool effects. And let's just change this to double bounce. So it's a whole lot of fun to play with this stuff. The same thing, we could put this on the, let's go over here to our ribbons. And we'll paste that there. And then we have our ribbons, and let's change that color. And that's our ribbons. And if we change the chase size, you start seeing the outline of the ribbons more. And then we could also put that on our spokes. And let's watch what happens with the hierarchy. What takes priority? And we'll give this a yellow color. Pretty cool. And then there's also an outline. There's circles, but the outer line of the wheel is actually in the main rosary. And so we will put that there. And we'll just make that a white color. And we'll put that to not double bounce. Let's just go one way. There we go. And now we're just getting a lot more turned on. Pretty cool stuff. So I've fallen in love with this model. As a sequencer, having things like this is just a lot of fun. I can go in here and same thing with the Mega Reel, and Doug Reel designed this model, I believe, and we get some really cool effects with it. And this just creates a lot of dimension to what you can do. I know originally the biggest concern was, is anyone going to spend money on pixels to put in one model, let alone two of the same model, on their house? That just seems absurd. And then I've got to power it, and I totally got it. And that was the first knee-jerk reaction, was like, oh my gosh, what are people going to do? But I think it's one of Jay's biggest sellers. And the reality is, we put a lot more pixels than this in a matrix, a pixel matrix. This is a drop in the bucket. Oh God, I said bucket. Hey Jordan, please take that word out of this conversation. But really, it's nothing when you're talking about having 4,000 to 5,000 pixels in a matrix. This is it's controllable, but it's the shapes, it's the cool things you can do with it. And I don't know, I think it's the cat's meow. Let's go over here. Let's just take this and let's try something completely different. I'm going to move this out of the way for a second. I need to change this to per design. Let's make this thicker. Let's give it a color, a couple of colors. Yeah. There we go. Now, that's pretty cool. And then if we look at the whole thing put together, you start creating some really beautiful designs with it. And that's one of the reasons I love it. Same thing, one of my other favorite models that is fun to play with, and it's because of the pixel density, is the Mother of All Wreaths group. Even if you have one, put another one in there, even though it doesn't turn on, use them, because it is just so cool. In here, this particular prop, because it is wired this way, and Scott may be able to address this better than I can, the wiring view on this simply starts in the middle and goes all the way around, and so on until it ends 640 nodes later. So this one behaves a little bit differently. If we look at this, and this is on overlay center, a lot of times overlay center will look fine on a prop like this. For instance, if I were to take this, control copy, and I go up to another native model like that of the tree topper, that's native. It was created in xLights, and I recommend everybody try to create the models you can in xLights that are available up here. Arches, definitely this typical stars, yes, these stars. Candy cane is another story. I've approached Scott with an idea on that he may look at. But things you can't do natively, of course, are these snowflakes. These are custom models. You can't do that, and you can't do that with the rosary. But you can do that with, a circle matrix like this. And I recommend that. You'll have better results. On top of that, having this created from xLights gives you one thing that you won't get if it's a custom model. And that happens to be this little puppy here called, let me click on it, called Layer Star. I use this 99% of the time. And it does some really cool things. Now, not with this one. I would have to change some things to get it to do what I want. But on effects with something like this, let me put this over here. You'll see that that's on default. Per preview, single line, but watch what happens when we go on Layer Star. Completely different. Let's take the number of chases down. Chase size, and let's go from middle. Let's just do that. That looks good. That's kind of cool. Speed this up a little bit, give it some movement. When I put this on default, just splits it. Per preview, single line, just going to go round and round and round. And then we put it on Layer Star. This is just some of the coolest stuff. Put a little 3D fade on there. Beautiful. Love it. Okay, so let's go back to what we were focusing on with the mother of all wreaths. And that is, why does this native file not work with overlay centered or overlay center scaled? You have to put it on per model, per preview, and now it's working. Okay, and let's isolate this. Let's just take this out of the equation. We're only looking at this. Okay, and that works fine. I will tell you that per model, per preview will do this as well on a custom model. So if you exported it, imported it, this works fine. I just don't recommend doing it, because the moment you change this to an effect like a single strand, right, that looks pretty cool. That looks so-so, not really into that. Per preview doesn't work on this. So let's go to my vertical. There we go. And that's my double bounce. And I'd probably use something like this. I'd probably put an effect. I'd probably add a couple of these on here, maybe 4. And that's kind of cool. And then next thing, what do? We play with this, right? Like that. Maybe we look at this. That's isolated. Let's just make it one color, blue. This is red. Put this over the top. We got 2 different things going on. Again, here's the exercise. Normal. 1 is mask. Underwhelming. 2 is mask. A little choppy. 1 is unmask. Interesting. Maybe I take this and change the rotate it. Nah, not digging it. 2 is unmask. That's kind of cool. 1 is true as a mask. So anyway, and then you start finding things that look kind of cool. Or what if we did the subtractive? Oh, that does nothing. Oh, let's do. Oh, now see, that's kind of cool. Shadow 1 on 2. Now you get the nice little colors in there that kind of cool. I like these colors. I don't know why, but I like the way that looks. And then again, we could insert another one on top. And yes, the dreaded single strand tool will make it white, big time contrast. Let's do something over here that is white. We'll change the default here to vertical. And I want to see. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Now we're going to change these. We're going to get this to go. Now this moves back and forth until I believe, no. Let me find it here. There we go. So this uses overlay center transformation 90. Now I'm going to put this in here, and we want to make this part of our group. So again, homework. What do? Practice. 1 is mask. That's kind of cool. 2 is mask. That's interesting. 1 is unmask. Now I'm liking that. That's kind of cool. So I'd probably maybe take these guys and make them chase size thicker. Ooh, that's interesting. Look at the choices we have here. We could just go nuts all day long. Maybe I take the fan effect and give it one arm more. There we go. One is on mask, chase size. Now I could put 2 in there, 3, 4, and then we start bringing in, you start seeing the fan effect. But I think it looks kind of cool like this or with just the one. And then we could change the size of it, and we get that, put a 3D fade. And now suddenly it starts to look like a cylinder, kind of like a, I don't know, a donut. And it's just kind of a cool effect. And that's left to right. Maybe we do a double bounce. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I think bounce left to right is going to just go back and forth. And again, that just looks kind of cool. So that's kind of it on the Rosa wreath, on the mother of all wreaths, the Mega Reel. And there's a newer version of the Mega Reel with circles that's 10 times more intense that Doug is trying to talk me into putting into my layout. I just need to find a time machine so I can go back and do it. The rest of this, folks, it really is just playing. I don't have a degree in this. I have a lot of time with my butt in the seat, really. And I'm always just, it's fun for me to tinker and play with ideas. The biggest thing I can hopefully convey to people who are trying to tell stories with lights to the music that they love is try to make it a message. Try to make people feel things. Blinky, flashy is cool. There's a place for it. There's no such thing as a bad light show or a bad display, just different. But there are shows that can be hair raising and really take it to the next level. I know there's a lot of people trying to get on a Great Christmas Light Fight. For those of you that are trying to get on that, I would suggest looking at avant-garde type music, things that are unique and not standard. I would say that they're probably tired of hearing Wizards in Winter, and they're looking for fresh meat, so to speak, for unique ways to express light shows and displays. So if you're one of those candidates or you're on the fence about what type of song choices, you can always reach out to me and pick my brain on this stuff. Our episode will air this December for season 7. So, and don't ask me if we won or lost. I cannot tell you that. I can tell you we did and we didn't. So, or we didn't and did. See, I can't tell you. I'm under contract. I can't tell you what happened. I can tell you it was great and we loved the show and we would do it again in a heartbeat. So with that, I'm going to end the segment and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll turn off the share, and people want to share their lovely faces as we talk. That would be super cool.
The xLights project exists because of people like you. Help continue the project by making a donation today at xlights.org/donate.